Hello, everyone. I'm Mandi Rae. I'm here for OPA, the Organization for Professional Astrology, and I'm here with Arlan Wise today. Hello, Arlan. How are you?
Andy, good to see you.
Good to see you too. Arlan's a part of OPA and has been for a while. How long have you been with OPA?
1994.
Yeah, yeah. So
Yep,
that's 30 years last year. Yeah, it's
yep,
a whole Saturn cycle.
definitely. Yeah. I
So,
walked into this conference and I was just sucked in by Oprah.
oh
So,
yeah, I have the same experience. I went to a conference and that was it. So I really love OPA.
yeah.
And OPA is going to be putting on an AstroBiz Summit in April 25th through 27th, online. And Arlen will be presenting some stuff. And, why is an AstroBiz Summit important? I think that's the first place I like to start because astrology and business. I think some people shy away from that, like, whoa, 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 don't call it a business. But whenever you devote enough time to something and you find out you're pouring yourself into something and into other people, as happens with astrology, there's the business part. How
Yeah.
do you view that or work with astrology as business?
Well, it has to be a business because you have to have Saturn comes in. You can't just give it all away as much as you want to. You have to have your rules, you have your consultation, you have to know your times, your prices, and you have to know what you can do and figure out how much you want to make and how to achieve that goal. And so this is what OPE has been doing since the very beginning, is because it was formed for the person who is working with astrology as a profession, and this is all to try to help you make that a profession. You can do it full time. So I think it's very important what we're doing. And then a couple of years ago, Maurice came up with iAstrologer, which this is segued into, which is really all about the tools you need to be working as an astrologer. So I think it's important, and this conference looks really exciting because there's so many different bits, and so many different people giving so much. So I think it'd be fun.
Yeah, that's part of something that it
Yeah.
didn't shock me, but that would surprise me is how many different ways there are to make an income with astrology, and a lot of that can be online writing, and that's what you're actually presenting on is writing for
Yes.
astrologers.
Yes. And so my class is going to be 50 minutes, which is going to be a real challenge for me because usually, I used to do it at the retreat. So I'd have 3 days to work with people, 3 full days. Or when we've done it online, we've had like, 6 sessions of 3 hours each. So there's a lot of material to try to squinch into 50 minutes. I'll have to pick what's most important. But what I think is really, and it's also going to be a little bit like basics. Like you can't learn astrology without learning the signs and the planets and what they mean. So you really need the bottom line basics of writing because there's so much, I don't want to say bad writing. So let's say there's so many articles that you'd start reading in the journal and you just can't get through them because it's convoluted because they're repeating themselves. And that's when I started thinking astrologers really could use help in writing, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been with you in some things like peer group, and
Yeah.
you do teach a little bit about that in peer group. So, as far as like your top tip, if someone were to ask you, what's one of the best things you can tell someone off the cuff?
I would say be specific. Don't talk around the subject, go right to it and be specific. You know, it's also this sense of if you can condense it and say it in a small amount of words, then you really got your putting your idea across. So that's very important to me.
Hmm.
To be clear and to be specific. And when go back to all the good writing teachers, and I have this list of books to recommend to people, and they're all saying the same thing. You have to write it and then you have to edit and you have to cut it down and then you have to keep editing. And a lot of people, I think, don't do that. And especially in self published books. You read them and you think, because I've done a lot of book reviewing, and you say, where was the editor here?
Hmm.
Why am I reading this over and over and over? Is he copy and pasting? So I think the big tips will be, your bottom line, And also I think it's really important to figure out how to use examples, because astrology is something that you can't assume people know. And so you have to put it into, we're translating from the astrological language into English, and you have to be able to give examples or images, for people to grasp what's going on.
Mm.
You
Yeah,
know,
and there's so many different places to put writing now. There's magazines, and OPA has one, The Evolving Astrologer. And that's a wonderful magazine. It's print also, so you can order one, by the way. There are books, there's blogs, there's Substack, there's Instagram. You can write everywhere with
right.
astrology. And where do you typically spend a lot of time writing for your own profession?
Well, I have this, monthly column I send out, and then I post it every morning on Instagram and Facebook, and just kind of telling people what's happening and trying to keep as much astrology out of it, so people can say, well, this is the day to do this, or this
Mhm.
is not the day to make the important decisions. So that's kind of where I'm going with my writing. And I'm actually right now starting, I've got this idea, and I really want to, there's a book, that's what I want to be working on the next few years, because so many astrologers have died, my contemporaries, and they never wrote anything,
Mm.
and their body of work is getting lost. So I'm feeling like a historian or an archivist to go and listen to the lectures and to write it out and try to put this material in a book so it won't be lost. The
Mhm.
younger astrologers can get the wisdom of, these people who did great work. The other
Right.
thing about writing is I've also noticed that some people, words come out of their hands better than words come out of their mouth. And I mean, you can put somebody up in front of a microphone and they can, like Rick Levine, can talk forever, you know. But then you get somebody like me who really has to write it out, and that's where I understand it, and then I can present it.
Mhm.
So to help those people too, it's important to be able to write.
And some people like to hear things on video or like to hear things on audio, but there are some people who really need the writing to read every day.
Right, because some people have a visual, like I have a visual memory. So if I see it, I'll remember it, but if I hear it, I'm not as apt to remember it.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's also some tips and tricks. You were talking about metaphors, and I think that's extremely
Mhm.
important with astrology and how beautiful that we get to use metaphors, probably more so than, if we were writing about archaeology or something,
Right,
So
right. Because
it's
it's,
pretty
you
nice.
know, we're talking about a symbolic language, so we need to create symbols, and sometimes if you create your own symbols, it's a little more impactful than, yeah, you know, Aries is the ram, it's going to go boom, boom. But if you think, well, Aries is also the emergency worker who's running in the burning building, that says a lot about what Aries is and how its
Mhm.
motivation. So that's why I say it's important to have people to make up their own. So that's what I like to do in the writing workshops also. You
Mm.
know, create their own images, and I hope we'll have time to do some exercises, because that's always fun to get people to actually write, and say, are you understanding what I'm saying here?
Hmm. Let me ask you this. Since you write a
Yeah.
lot, do you ever reach blocks where you just don't feel like writing? And what do you do with that?
I wait till I feel like writing again.
You can get hard on yourself, I think, whenever you're supposed to be cranking something out. So it's nice to hear that, if you don't feel like it, you just kind of take a break.
It's like everything is waves. So either you're rushing, you're flowing with the writing energy, or it's not happening. So you go do something else.
Hmm.
There's always something else to do.
But then you have to edit it too afterwards.
That's absolutely everything. And it's
uh,
and I learned too that when you listen to your clients, they are giving you the images that you can then use to write to explain things. If you,
that's true.
yeah, and because they will say what's going on very well. So it's listening. But to get back to this class, I'm going to, as I said, trying to condense down the the gems of what's important and what people can take away for in an hour.
Mhm.
You
Yeah,
know,
and there's several presenters at this AstroBiz Summit. But I'm really excited about attending because there is something for everyone. There is something for people who write, something for people who speak, public speaking, people who want to go on YouTube, and it is just an amazing assortment of experts really in their field. Because there is a niche, and finding your niche is really important, I think.
extremely, and the fact that it's changing so fast. You
Mhm.
know, 20 years ago, there was no YouTube. And so a conference of this type wouldn't be talking about that. You'd be talking about different issues. And now everybody's adapting to, and who knows what's going to be happening in 10 years.
Mhm.
You
Yeah,
have to keep with it.
flying cars, perhaps. We'll see.
Yeah.
Well, you can check out this AstroBiz Summit on opaastrology.org. And
Mm-hmm.
it's right there on the front page. You can click AstroBiz Summit and you can see the schedule before you sign up. And I encourage people to look into membership because everything we do is just a little cheaper if you're a member, and memberships are really inexpensive anyway, and really, really amazing to connect with the community of other astrologers because you are doing this a lot of times alone, writing alone, doing your one-on-one sessions, but to have that connection is really
Right.
important.
Right.
Yeah. Well,
It's going to
thank
be
you.
a conference, and I see Frank Clifford is, presenting, and he's great. So that'll be a great class. So
I'm
good.
really looking forward to it. And thank you for joining me today. I appreciate it. And please, if you are watching this on YouTube or wherever, please leave us a comment or a like. That would be awesome. And check
Okay.
out Arlan. Arlan, what is your website?
It's arlanwise.com.
If you want to know more about Arlan. And as always, I'm Mandi Rae with OPA. Thank you.